Hello and welcome to Speed Politics 101, your go-to channel for unpacking the world of politics, society, and everything in between. I'm Billy Agwanda, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we explore the fascinating ideas that shape our societies, past, present, and future. If you're curious about how politics influences our everyday lives, hit the subscribe and notification button so you never miss an update. Imagine a world where true freedom is not about doing whatever you want, but about living in harmony with the collective will of the people. A world where government is not a ruler over its subjects, but a reflection of their shared aspirations. This was the radical vision of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In the 18th century, the dominant intellectual current, shaped by the Enlightenment, was generally optimistic about the direction of society. Philosophers such as Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Diderot championed reason, progress, and the transformative power of science, technology, and rational governance. Many Enlightenment thinkers believed that human civilization was advancing toward greater knowledge, freedom, and prosperity, particularly through institutions like constitutional government, free markets, and scientific inquiry. However, Rousseau stood apart from this mainstream optimism. He was deeply skeptical of the idea that progress in the arts, sciences, and political institutions necessarily led to moral or social improvement. Instead, he argued that civilization often corrupts rather than elevates human nature, fostering inequality, vanity, and dependence rather than virtue and genuine freedom. This critique became even sharper in The Social Contract, where Rousseau argued that modern political systems enslave individuals rather than liberating them, unless rooted in the general will. In this video, we'll explore Rousseau's vision of the social contract through the lenses of freedom, equality, and collective sovereignty. How did his ideas challenge the traditional order? Why did his writings inspire both democratic ideals and revolutionary fervor? And what lessons can we draw from Rousseau today as we navigate questions of power, identity, and governance? Imagine a world where freedom and authority coexist, where the power of the state does not oppress but instead protects. This is the challenge Rousseau takes on in The Social Contract. He asks, how can individuals remain free while living under a government? Rousseau argues that as societies evolve, people become dependent on one another. And while this cooperation is necessary, it also breeds conflict. In Discourse on Inequality, he explains how fear and insecurity push individuals to accept state authority. But this acceptance comes at a cost: the reinforcement of inequality. Laws, rather than serving everyone, become tools of the wealthy, securing their dominance while the poor remain subjugated. Like Locke before him and Marx after, Rousseau sees the state as an instrument of class rule, benefiting the few at the expense of the many. The poor consent to this system out of fear, unaware that it traps them in permanent subordination. But Rousseau refuses to accept this fate. In The Social Contract, he envisions a different kind of state, one where laws are shaped by the general will, the collective interest of the people. True freedom, he insists, is not the absence of authority but the ability to live under laws we create for ourselves. In obeying these laws, we are not subjects, we are citizens, governing ourselves, and securing both order and liberty. This is Rousseau's radical vision, a society where power is not imposed from above, but emerges from within. A society where each person, by following the general will, remains free. Rousseau's concept of the general will is central to his political philosophy and distinguishes his vision of governance from those of Hobbes and Locke. Unlike Hobbes, who argued for an all-powerful sovereign based on individual promises, and Locke, who sought to balance power among different government institutions, Rousseau believed that true sovereignty lies in the collective will of the people. The general will is not simply the sum of individual interests, but rather the expression of the common good. It is, by definition, infallible. If a decision does not align with the true interests of society, it is not the general will but merely the will of all, a collection of individual preferences that may not serve the common good. For Rousseau, laws must be derived from the general will to be legitimate, ensuring that citizens obey only rules they have, in effect, imposed on themselves. This emphasis on collective sovereignty led Rousseau to argue for universal civic participation. He went so far as to claim that individuals could be forced to be free, a paradoxical idea suggesting that true freedom comes from submission to laws that reflect the common good. In contrast to Locke and Hobbes, who prioritized constitutional stability and consent, Rousseau's focus was on legitimacy through direct democracy. His ideas, therefore, present a more radical and democratic vision of governance, where the people as a whole are the ultimate source of political authority. So far we have seen that for Rousseau, to be free is to live not under the rule of arbitrary power, but by laws we have given ourselves. But how does he conceive the emergence of the general will? In his work on the social contract, he speaks of three wills that shape human society. First, there is the private will, our personal desires, the selfish pull of individual interest. Then there is the general will, the collective voice of a people who recognize that true freedom is only possible when all submit to laws that protect the whole. And finally, there is the corporate will, the will of factions, of special interests, which corrupts the harmony of the general will and turns the state into a tool of oppression. According to Rousseau, in a well-ordered society, private and general will align because citizens understand that laws, though limiting in the immediate sense, are the very conditions that guarantee their liberty. But Rousseau warns that most societies fail to reach this balance because some people resist, unwilling to sacrifice personal gain for the common good. Others form factions, perhaps the rich against the poor, or the powerful against the weak, imposing their will upon the state itself. When this happens, government ceases to serve the people and becomes an instrument of domination. But how, then, do we create a just society? How do we ensure that the general will prevails? Rousseau struggles with this very question and offers one answer: the legislator. This is no ordinary ruler, no enforcer of law, but a visionary, a figure who shapes the very soul of a nation. The legislator must instill in people a sense of belonging, a shared identity that allows them to rise above self-interest and embrace the common good. And yet, here lies a paradox. If only virtuous citizens can create just laws, but only just laws can create virtuous citizens, where does the cycle begin? Rousseau's answer is unsettling. The legislator, he says, must persuade, not through reason alone, but through symbols, myths, even illusions. He must inspire people to want what is best for them before they fully understand why. And this is where the shadow of power lurks. For what is the difference between inspiration and manipulation? Between guidance and control? Perhaps this is why critics have seen in Rousseau's vision something dangerous, something authoritarian. For if freedom requires shaping the people into a form that they do not yet recognize, are they truly free at all? And what of the legislator himself? Who shaped him? If justice must begin somewhere, who was the first to teach it? Having examined the notion of the general will, what then should we make of Rousseau's core argument that freedom and authority can be reconciled in his ideal republic through obedience to the general will? The social contract opens with a striking declaration: man is born free but is everywhere in chains. Freedom is at the heart of Rousseau's philosophy, though he defines it in multiple ways. He sees the ability to choose, to act beyond mere instinct, as a key distinction between humans and animals. In the discourse on inequality, he presents animals as bound by fixed patterns of behavior, whereas humans can reject natural impulses, making both moral progress and moral decline possible. This capacity for choice is central to his moral philosophy in the social contract, where he argues that giving up one's freedom to obey another's authority strips human actions of moral worth. To renounce freedom, he claims, is to renounce what makes us human. Rousseau therefore tries to clarify how the formation of a legitimate state does not diminish freedom but transforms it. Here he distinguishes between natural freedom, the unrestricted right to all things, and civil freedom, which is secured under the law. Natural freedom, reminiscent of Hobbes' state of nature, is effectively meaningless in a world of interdependent humans, as constant competition and resource scarcity lead to conflict and insecurity. The establishment of a state, governed by laws derived from the general will, resolves this chaos by ensuring a sphere of equal freedom for all, protected under the law. Rousseau argues that, as long as laws apply equally and remain non-oppressive, they provide a net gain in individual freedom compared to the pre-political state. Beyond civil freedom, Rousseau introduces the idea of moral freedom, which he defines as obedience to laws one has prescribed for oneself. This concept, though presented briefly, is crucial to his larger argument. Rousseau seeks a political arrangement where each citizen obeys only himself, raising the question: can a person truly be self-governing while obeying laws they may not have personally supported? Rousseau's response asserts that even those outvoted in a democracy remain bound by a will that is ultimately their own because the democratic process, in his view, reveals the content of the general will, which belongs to all citizens. However, many critics find this reasoning unconvincing, arguing that it struggles to resolve the tension between individual dissent and collective decision-making. Previously, we have seen that Rousseau believes that human beings, unlike animals, are defined by their ability to choose. This ability or liberty is what allows us to act against our instincts, to rise above mere survival, and to engage in moral decision-making. And yet, in the state of nature, this freedom is fragile, constantly threatened by conflict and insecurity. The transition to civil society, he argues, is not a loss of freedom, but a transformation, from natural freedom, which is chaotic and unstable, to civil freedom, which is secured by the law and the collective will. But here lies one of Rousseau's most radical and to many problematic assertions: representation is a form of enslavement. Unlike Hobbes, who believed that sovereignty could be delegated to a ruler, Rousseau rejects the very idea that legislative power can be transferred. For him, true self-rule means direct participation in lawmaking. Even in a democracy, if we elect representatives who make laws on our behalf, we are surrendering our moral agency. We are no longer truly free. He goes so far as to say that the mere desire to be represented signals a decay of civic virtue, a moral failure. Now, let's pause for a moment. Imagine the practical implications of such a system. A society where every citizen must engage in every legislative decision? Clearly, this would limit the size and complexity of any viable state. And indeed, Rousseau himself, in his later work Considerations on the Government of Poland, takes a more pragmatic approach. But does he truly reject representation in all forms? Not necessarily. He makes a key distinction: the sovereign, the people as a whole, must make the laws, but the government, a smaller elected body, can administer them. In this sense, Rousseau's republic may not be so far removed from modern constitutional democracy. Yet, Rousseau is deeply pessimistic about the future of any republic. Governments, he warns, develop their own interests, distinct from those of the people. As states grow larger and citizens become more distant from one another, a ruling elite inevitably emerges, slowly usurping power from the sovereign. In some moments, Rousseau even seems to suggest that this elite will manipulate public deliberation, deciding what issues will be discussed, shaping the very direction of the general will. Is this democracy? Or is it an illusion of self-rule? And there is another troubling element of Rousseau's vision, one that cannot be ignored. His commitment to freedom and equality does not extend to women. They are subject to the authority of the state, yet excluded from participation in shaping its laws. This is not merely a reflection of his time. Rousseau expresses deeply misogynistic views, portraying women as artificial beings, trapped in a world of appearances and deception. Even as he argues that no people are naturally servile, that oppression is what creates submission, he fails to extend this insight to women. It did not take long for this contradiction to be noticed, and modern feminist scholars continue to critique the tensions in his thought.